Her blood ran cold when she heard his reply. HFY Sci-Fi Story. You know, for someone about to be executed by an advanced alien race, you seem remarkably calm, said Zarlith, mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among the Vexor species. Lieutenant Dave Miller leaned back against the cell wall, arms crossed behind his head as if he were lounging on a beach somewhere instead of awaiting his fate in an alien prison ship. Well, I've always been told I have a good poker face. Poker face? The translator struggled with the idiom, and Zarlith's compound eyes shifted in patterns of confusion. It's a game. From Earth. You know what? Never mind. Dave stretched and yawned, making a show of his nonchalance. So when's this execution supposed to happen anyway? I've got places to be. Zarlith chittered, the sound echoing off the metallic walls of the holding cell. The noise was somewhere between laughter and indignation, a uniquely Vexor emotional display that Dave had learned to recognize during his 3-week captivity. You humans are so illogical. Your home world is quarantined, your ship has been destroyed, and tomorrow you will be publicly terminated as an example to other species who might consider violating Galactic Council directives. Yet you act as though this is merely an inconvenience. Dave shrugged. What can I say? Perspective is everything. Perspective will not save you from molecular disintegration. Maybe, maybe not. Dave's eyes twinkled with something that made Zarlith's exoskeleton tighten uncomfortably. It wasn't fear she saw in the human's eyes. It was anticipation? Impossible. I do not understand you, human. Your kind was deemed too dangerous to join the galactic community. The quarantine was the most merciful option available to the Council. Yet here you are, somehow having passed through our blockade, stealing technology, and carrying weapons that should be beyond your manufacturing capabilities. Dave smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Maybe we're just full of surprises. Zarlith's mandibles clicked rapidly in frustration. The High Executor sent me to interrogate you one final time. She believes you must have had accomplices. Tell me who they are, and perhaps we can arrange for a more humane execution. At this, Dave actually laughed. A full-bodied, genuine laugh that echoed through the cell and down the corridor, causing several guard drones to activate their defensive protocols. What is so amusing? Zarlith demanded, her voice rising to the particular pitch that Dave had come to recognize as genuine irritation. It's just... Dave wiped a tear from his eye. The idea that you think being humane is a mercy. That's rich. Explain. Dave sat up straighter, his casual demeanor slipping just slightly to reveal something harder underneath. Look, Zar, can I call you Zar? We've been chat buddies for 3 weeks now. You may not. I am Security Director Zarlith Kavex of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. Right. So, Xar, here's the thing about humans that you folks never bothered to learn before quarantining us. We don't do well with cages. Never have. It's kind of our whole deal. Your species' psychological comfort was not a consideration in the Council's decision. Clearly, Dave said dryly. But you should have at least Googled us before deciding we were too dangerous to join your little space club. It might have saved you some trouble. Google? The translator glitched again. Another Earth reference. Look, the point is, you ever wonder why I'm so calm? Zarlith's compound eyes narrowed, focusing more intently on the human. I assumed it was some psychological defense mechanism. Or perhaps you are simply mentally defective? Wow, rude. Dave stretched again, rolling his shoulders. Nah, I'm calm because this isn't my first rodeo. Your... what? Not my first time being captured by aliens who think they've got humanity all figured out. Zarlith's antennae twitched in surprise. That is impossible. The quarantine has been in effect for 37 galactic cycles. No human has breached it before. That you know of. Dave winked. Let me ask you something, Zar. In those 37 galactic cycles, how many enforcement ships have you lost near the Sol quarantine zone? How many patrol vessels just disappeared? The alien's posture stiffened noticeably. This was classified information that the humans should have no knowledge of. The disappearances were attributed to cosmic anomalies, radiation storms, equipment failures, anything but the possibility that the quarantined species might be responsible. That is not relevant to your current situation, Zarlith said. But there was a new note in her voice. Uncertainty. Sure it is. Because tomorrow when you're supposed to execute me as a warning to others, yeah, that's not gonna happen. Your confidence is misplaced. No one knows you are here. No one is coming for you. Dave checked the strange metallic band around his wrist, a device the Vexor had been unable to remove or deactivate. They'd assumed it was some sort of primitive timepiece and had ceased bothering with it after multiple failed attempts to analyze it. Actually, he said, glancing up with that same unsettling gleam in his eyes, they should be here in about 20 minutes, give or take a few for traffic. For the first time since their conversations began, Zarlith felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control systems. Why aren't you scared, human? She found herself asking, breaking protocol completely with the personal query. Dave's smile widened, and his voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Because I'm not the one who should be scared right now. Security Director Zarlith Kavex prided herself on her impeccable record. In 19 years of service to the Galactic Council, she had never lost a prisoner, never failed an assignment, and never, not once, felt the cold grip of fear while performing her duties. Until today, she stalked down the corridor away from the human cell, her exoskeleton plates clicking together in an unconscious display of agitation. Her second-in-command, Tarek, fell into step beside her. "Did the prisoner provide any useful information, Director?" he asked, his voice modulated to the formal tones appropriate for on-duty communication. "No," she replied curtly. Then, reconsidering, "Perhaps. Prepare a security sweep of all sectors. Level 1 protocols." Tarek's antennae quivered in surprise. "Level 1, but that would require—" "I know what it requires," she snapped. "Do it now, and double the guard on the prisoner. No one enters or leaves that cell without my direct authorization." "Yes, Director." Tarek hurried away, already issuing commands into his communication implant. Zarlith continued toward the command bridge, her mind racing. The human's confidence disturbed her. He had mentioned ships disappearing near the Sol quarantine zone, information that was indeed classified, though perhaps he was bluffing. But what if he wasn't? What if those disappearances weren't accidents? The Vexar prided themselves on their logical, methodical approach to all situations. Emotions were recognized as inevitable biological functions, but were never allowed to influence decision-making. Yet Zarlith found herself experiencing something dangerously close to dread as she replayed the human's words in her mind. "I'm not the one who should be scared right now." As she entered the command bridge, the ship's high executor, Vendra, turned to greet her. Vendra was impressive even by Vexor standards, nearly 7 feet tall with an iridescent exoskeleton that shimmered with implied authority. "Director Zarlith, I trust your final interrogation of the human was productive." "High Executor, I believe we may have a situation," Zarlith said, foregoing the usual formalities. "The prisoner has indicated that there may be a rescue attempt forthcoming." Vendra's mandibles clicked once in dismissal. "Impossible. Our sensors detect no vessels within 3 parsecs. The human is attempting psychological manipulation, a trait their species is known for. With respect, I recommend we move up the execution, now rather than waiting for the public ceremony tomorrow. And miss the opportunity to broadcast his termination as a warning to other species? The Council has specifically ordered—" The ship lurched suddenly, throwing both Vexor off balance. Warning klaxons blared throughout the command bridge as red emergency lighting bathed the room. "Report," Vendra demanded. The tactical officer's appendages flew over the control surfaces. "Unknown, High Executor. There was no impact, no weapons fire, but somehow we've lost propulsion and—" The officer paused, mandibles clicking rapidly in confusion. "This can't be right. According to our systems, we're being pulled." "Pulled? By what? There are no other ships in range." "Unknown, High Executor, but our velocity is increasing at a rate that doesn't match any known tractor technology." Zarlith felt that unfamiliar sensation of fear crawling through her nerve centers again. The human's words echoed in her mind. 20 minutes. Give or take a few for traffic. "High Executor," she said urgently, "we need to move the prisoner to a secure location immediately. Whatever is happening, he knew it was coming." Vendra stared at her for a moment, clearly weighing the unprecedented situation against protocol. "Very well. Take a squad and transfer him to the isolation chamber in Sector 7. Use maximum restraints." Zarlith nodded and turned to leave. But before she could exit the bridge, all ship systems suddenly went dark. For 3 terrifying seconds there was complete silence and darkness. Then the emergency systems activated, providing minimal lighting and life support. "Status report," Vendra demanded. "All primary and secondary systems are offline," the systems officer reported, voice strained. "We're operating on emergency power only. Communications, weapons, shields, everything is down." "That's impossible," Vendra insisted. Our systems have triple redundancies. They cannot all fail simultaneously unless they were made to fail, Zarlith finished quietly. The security alert on her personal communicator pinged, and she raised it to receive the message, somehow already knowing what it would be. "Director!" came Tarek's panicked voice. "The prisoner! He's gone!" Dave Miller moved silently through the maintenance shafts of the Vexar enforcement vessel, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. The timing had been perfect, just as Alexis had promised. The ship's systems had gone down exactly when his wrist device had indicated they would, giving him the 30-second window he needed to escape his cell. The Vexar hadn't even bothered to search him properly when they'd captured him. They'd removed his obvious equipment and weapons, but had completely missed the thin carbon fiber lockpicks woven into the seams of his uniform. And more importantly, they'd dismissed his wristband as decorative. Amateurs. He paused at a junction in the ventilation system, checking his band again. The small holographic display showed him a 3D map of the ship with a blinking indicator showing his destination, the auxiliary shuttle bay. According to the intel they'd gathered, the Vexar kept their short-range craft separate from the main hangar, primarily for emergency use by high-ranking officers. Perfect for a quick getaway. As he crawled through the narrow passage, Dave reflected on how spectacularly the Galactic Council had misunderstood humanity. They'd observed Earth for less than a decade before making their determination that humans were too volatile, too unpredictable, and too prone to violence to join the interstellar community. The quarantine had been established with the expectation that humans would eventually destroy themselves, solving the Council's problem without direct intervention. What they hadn't counted on was humanity's remarkable talent for adaptation, and our even more remarkable talent for spite. Being told we couldn't leave our solar system had only made us more determined to do exactly that. Being told we weren't welcome in the galactic community had only made us more creative about finding ways to join the party anyway. It was basically Psychology 101, but apparently advanced alien civilizations hadn't figured that out. Dave reached another junction and paused, hearing the sound of Vexar security teams scrambling below. He checked his wristband again, 5 minutes until the next phase. He needed to hurry. Continuing forward, he finally reached the maintenance access panel that, according to his map, should open directly into the auxiliary shuttle bay. He activated the small plasma cutter hidden in his boot heel, another item the Vexar had missed, and began cutting through the panel. As he worked, he thought about the conversation he'd had with Zarlith. The security director was sharper than most of the Vexar he'd encountered. She'd actually seemed to consider the possibility that humans might be responsible for those mysterious disappearances near the Sol quarantine zone, which of course they absolutely were. The panel gave way, and Dave carefully removed it, peering into the shuttle bay. 2 Vexar technicians were inside, obviously confused by the system's failure and trying to get their equipment online again. They hadn't noticed the maintenance panel opening behind them. Dave checked his wristband one more time. 3 minutes. He reached into another hidden pocket in his uniform and removed a small sphere about the size of a golf ball. "Sorry about this, folks," he muttered to himself, then tossed the sphere into the center of the room. The device bounced once, then released a quick pulse that caused both Vexar to immediately collapse. Non-lethal neurodisruptor, effective against most insectoid species and would keep them unconscious for about 20 minutes. More than enough time. Dave hopped down from the vent and quickly moved to the nearest shuttle. The design was alien, but he'd studied similar models during training. The Vexar, like most Council species, followed standardized engineering protocols. Once you understood the basic logic, you could figure out most of their technology. He placed his wristband against the shuttle's access panel, and after a moment, the device interfaced with the ship's systems, bypassing security. The door slid open with a soft hiss. "Sometimes it's too easy," Dave chuckled to himself as he climbed inside and headed for the pilot's seat. The shuttle's controls lit up as he approached, responding to the overrides being transmitted from his wristband. Within seconds, he had basic flight systems online, though weapons and communications remained blocked by the ship-wide shutdown. That was fine. He wouldn't need either for what came next. A glance at his wristband showed less than a minute remaining. Dave settled into the pilot's seat, initiated the launch sequence, and waited. Exactly on schedule, the massive emergency doors of the shuttle bay began to slide open, responding to some invisible command. Beyond them was open space and freedom. The shuttle lifted off smoothly, guided by Dave's practiced hands, and shot out into the starry void. He banked hard, coming around to get a view of the Vexar enforcement vessel that had been his prison for the past 3 weeks. It was an impressive sight, a sleek, insectoid-looking craft nearly a kilometer long, bristling with weapons that were currently offline. Under normal circumstances, escaping from such a ship would have been impossible. But these weren't normal circumstances. As Dave watched, a ripple seemed to pass through the space surrounding the Vexor vessel. Then, like a curtain being pulled back, a ship appeared where moments before there had been nothing but empty space. And what a ship it was! The UNSV Odysseus was not the largest human vessel ever built. At just over 2 kilometers long, it was actually considered mid-sized by Earth's military standards. But what it lacked in size, it more than made up for in innovation and firepower. Its hull was a patchwork of human design and reverse-engineered alien technology, giving it a cobbled-together appearance that belied its deadly effectiveness. And it was currently holding the Vexar enforcement vessel in some kind of invisible grip. Dave's communications system suddenly crackled to life, bypassing the jamming that affected the larger ship. "Lieutenant Miller," came a familiar voice, warm with amusement. "You're cutting it close, again." Dave grinned. "Captain Alvarez, fancy meeting you here in the middle of nowhere. Thanks for the assist." "Don't thank me yet. Get that shuttle on board before the Vexar figure out how to restore their systems. Docking Bay 4 is open and waiting." "Yes, ma'am." Dave guided the shuttle toward the massive human ship, noting with satisfaction that the Odysseus's stealth systems had been improved since he'd last seen her. The ship had been completely invisible until it chose to reveal itself, a technological feat that the Galactic Council believed to be centuries beyond human capability. Then again, the Council believed a lot of things about humans that weren't remotely accurate. As he approached Docking Bay 4, a thought occurred to him. "Captain, what about the other Vexar ships in the area? Won't they respond when this one fails to check in?" There was a pause, and Dave could almost hear the smile in Alvarez's voice when she replied. "What other Vexar ships, Lieutenant?" Security Director Zarlith Kavex had never experienced such chaos on a Council vessel. Emergency teams scrambled through dimly lit corridors, communication systems functioned only at short range, and the ship's AI, normally a constant reassuring presence, was completely offline. Most disturbing of all, the human prisoner had vanished without a trace. "How?" Vendra demanded, her usual composure cracking as she loomed over the security console where Zarlith was attempting to coordinate search efforts. "How does one primitive mammal escape from a maximum security cell during a Level 1 lockdown?" "I don't know, High Executor," Zarlith admitted, mandibles tight with tension. "But he knew this was going to happen. He practically announced it during my interrogation. Impossible. The quarantine around Sol is absolute. They have no ships capable of—" A junior officer interrupted, rushing onto the bridge with obvious agitation. "High Executor, we've detected a launch from the auxiliary shuttle bay." Vendra whirled toward the main view screen, which was operating at minimal capacity. "Show me!" The screen flickered to life, displaying a small Vexar shuttle speeding away from the ship. "And beyond it, by the first egg," Zarlith whispered. Where there had been empty space moments before, a massive vessel now hung against the backdrop of stars. It was unlike any ship in the Council registry, a strange amalgamation of styles and technologies that somehow formed a coherent, threatening whole. "Human," Vendra hissed, the word both an identification and a curse. As they watched, the shuttle approached the unknown vessel and disappeared into what appeared to be a docking bay. Then the massive ship began to move, turning away from the disabled Vexar craft. "Weapons! Target that vessel immediately!" Vendra commanded. "Weapons are still offline, High Executor," the tactical officer replied miserably. "As are engines, long-range communications, and—" "I don't want excuses, I want solutions!" Zarlith barely heard the exchange. Her mind was racing, pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. The human hadn't been bluffing about the disappeared ships. The quarantine hadn't contained humanity at all. It had merely hidden their progress from the Council's watchful eyes. While the galaxy believed them safely caged within their solar system, humans had apparently been developing technologies that should have been impossible for them. And more disturbing still, they had been doing so in secret, allowing the Council to continue believing in the effectiveness of the quarantine. Why? What was their purpose? The answer came to her in a flash of insight that felt like ice in her veins. The human, Dave Miller, hadn't been caught accidentally breaching the quarantine. He had been on a mission. A mission to the database, she said aloud, cutting through Vendra's continued ranting. "High Executor, we need to check the central database immediately." "The database? What are you talking about, Director? Our priority is to stop that ship." "With respect, High Executor, I believe that was never their primary objective." Zarlith moved to an auxiliary console and began inputting commands. The system responded sluggishly, still affected by whatever had disabled the ship's main functions. After several tense moments, data began scrolling across the screen. Zarlith's compound eyes widened as she reviewed the access logs. "During the system's failure, someone accessed our secure databases. They downloaded everything. Patrol routes, fleet deployments, defense codes, communication protocols, everything. Vendra stared at her in disbelief. How is that possible? Even with our systems compromised, the quantum encryption should have... They had the decryption keys, Zarlith said quietly. The human wasn't just a prisoner. He was bait. Bait? They let us capture him. Perhaps they even arranged it. Then they waited until we brought him aboard our command vessel with its direct access to the Council's most sensitive information. And while we were focused on him and his impending execution, understanding dawned in Vendra's eyes. They stole our secrets. On the view screen, the human vessel suddenly shimmered and vanished from sight, leaving no trace of its presence. And now they're gone, Zarlith finished, a strange emotion, something between respect and terror, coloring her voice. With everything they need to bypass the quarantine completely. Captain Elena Alvarez watched with satisfaction as the stars streaked past the Odysseus's viewports. The jump to FTL had been smooth, leaving the disabled Vexar vessel far behind. Damage report, she requested, turning to her XO. Commander Tariq Khoury grinned widely. That's the beautiful part, Captain. There isn't one. Operation went off without a hitch. The Emir device worked perfectly. Every electronic system on their ship was temporarily paralyzed without causing permanent damage. They should regain full functionality in about 6 hours. Well done. And our guest? Medical has cleared him. Minor dehydration, some bruising, but otherwise in good shape. He's waiting for you in the debriefing room. Alvarez nodded. And the data? Being decrypted and analyzed as we speak. Preliminary reports suggest we got everything we were looking for and then some. The tech team is particularly excited about some theoretical research on interdimensional propulsion. Excellent. Alvarez rose from her command chair. You have the bridge, Commander. I'll go welcome our hero home. She made her way through the corridors of the Odysseus, nodding to crew members who stepped aside respectfully as she passed. The ship hummed with the quiet efficiency that she had worked hard to instill in her people. The debriefing room doors slid open at her approach, revealing Lieutenant Dave Miller sprawled in a chair, feet propped up on the conference table, munching on what appeared to be a genuine apple. He straightened as she entered, though not quite to attention. Captain? Lieutenant. She took a seat across from him. Enjoying your snack? Like you wouldn't believe. 3 weeks of Vexar food substitutes was an experience I don't care to repeat. He took another bite of the apple, savoring it. They tried to approximate human nutritional needs, but everything tasted like cardboard soaked in copper. Your sacrifice for humanity is noted, she said dryly. And appreciated. The mission was a complete success, thanks in large part to your performance. Dave shrugged, but she could see the pride in his eyes. All I did was get captured and spend 3 weeks acting like I wasn't terrified out of my mind. You did more than that. Your intelligence gathering during captivity was invaluable. We now know more about Vexar psychology and ship operations than all our previous reconnaissance combined. Yeah, well, turns out when they think you're just a dumb mammal headed for execution, they get pretty chatty around you. Dave finished his apple and tossed the core into a recycler. By the way, I particularly enjoyed your response about the other Vexar ships. What exactly happened to our friends? Alvarez smiled. Let's just say the Vexar will be submitting some very interesting reports about mysterious disappearances in this sector. You didn't? Of course not. We're not monsters, Lieutenant. We simply relocated them. By the time they manage to navigate back to Council space, we'll be long gone with everything we need. Dave nodded, relieved. Despite humanity's justified grievances against the Galactic Council, there was a line they had all agreed not to cross. They weren't fighting for vengeance, they were fighting for their rightful place among the stars. So what happens now? He asked. We have their patrol routes, their security codes, their communication protocols. Now? Alvarez leaned forward, her expression turning serious. Now we implement Phase 2. The Council thought quarantining Earth would contain us. Then they thought limiting us to covert operations would minimize our impact. They were wrong on both counts. It's time to formally introduce ourselves to the galactic community, Dave guessed. Precisely. Not as the violent, unpredictable savages they've painted us to be, but as who we truly are. Innovative, adaptable, and extremely difficult to keep down. She stood, straightening her uniform. The Council didn't want us as equals. Fine. But they're about to discover we won't be ignored either. Dave rose as well, his expression thoughtful. You know, when they captured me, Security Director Zarlith asked me why I wasn't scared. I told her she was the one who should be afraid. He paused. But the truth is, I wasn't trying to threaten her. I was trying to make her understand something fundamental about humans. And what's that? That we're not fearless. We're just really good at turning fear into action. That's what the Council never understood about us. Danger doesn't paralyze us. It galvanizes us. Alvarez smiled. A lesson they're about to learn firsthand. The quarantine ends today, Lieutenant, and a new chapter in galactic history begins. 3 days later, on the Galactic Council's central world of harmonious unity, an emergency session was called. Representatives from all 417 member species gathered in the Great Chamber, their confusion and concern palpable as they waited for an explanation of the unprecedented meeting. High Counselor Zavex of the Vexar, a distant relative of Zarlith, took the central podium, his ornate ceremonial armor gleaming under the chamber's lights. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his translated voice echoing through the vast space, "I regret to inform you that we face a situation of the utmost gravity. 3 days ago, a Council enforcement vessel was attacked and disabled by an unknown craft. Sensitive information was stolen and a human prisoner escaped custody." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The word human was repeated with tones ranging from curiosity to outright fear. "This incident," Zavex continued, "would be concerning enough on its own. However, it appears to have been merely a prelude. In the last 72 hours, 17 more Council vessels have reported similar attacks. In each case, systems were temporarily disabled, data was extracted, and the attacking ships vanished without trace." The murmurs grew louder. "Furthermore," Zavex said, raising his voice to be heard over the growing commotion, "the quarantine beacons surrounding the Sol system have all gone silent. Our attempts to investigate have been thwarted by sensor-jamming technology of unknown origin. We must face the possibility that the quarantine has been compromised." An Arcturian representative rose from their seat, their gelatinous form quivering with agitation. "Are you suggesting that humans have developed technology capable of defeating our most advanced systems? Impossible. They were a pre-FTL civilization when the quarantine was established." "I am merely reporting the facts as we know them," Zavex replied stiffly. "And the facts indicate—" He was interrupted by a sudden dimming of the chamber's lights. The massive holographic projector in the center of the room, used for presentations and votes, activated on its own, displaying an image that caused many representatives to rise in alarm. It was a human, a female, by their dimorphic standards, wearing what appeared to be a formal uniform. "Greetings, Galactic Council," the hologram said, speaking perfect Council standard without the aid of a translator. "I am Captain Elena Alvarez of the United Nations space vessel Odysseus, representing the free and sovereign species of humanity." Zavex's mandibles clicked rapidly in shock. "How are you accessing this chamber? This is a secure—" "There is nothing secure from us anymore, High Counselor," the human interrupted calmly. "Not your chambers, not your ships, not your databases. The quarantine you imposed on humanity 37 years ago is officially over. It didn't work." Chaos erupted in the chamber as representatives shouted questions and demands, some calling for security, others for calm. The human waited patiently until Zavex managed to restore some semblance of order. "What do you want?" the High Counselor finally asked. "Recognition," Alvarez replied simply. "Humanity will no longer be confined to our solar system. We will no longer be excluded from galactic affairs. We will no longer be treated as dangerous children to be contained and forgotten. You have violated Council law, stolen classified information, and attacked Council vessels." "Vessels," Zavex protested. "This only confirms that the quarantine was justified." The human smiled, a facial expression that many Council species found deeply unsettling. "We have disabled Council vessels without causing a single casualty. We have taken information that you had no right to withhold from us, and we have freed ourselves from an unjust imprisonment." Her voice hardened slightly. "If we were truly the violent savages you believe us to be, this conversation would be very different." Before Zavex could respond, a new figure stepped into view beside Alvarez. Several Vexer representatives clicked in surprise as they recognized Lieutenant Dave Miller. "You may remember me," Dave said with a slight wave. "I was scheduled to be publicly executed tomorrow. Sorry to mess up your plans." "What humanity wants is simple," Alvarez continued. "A seat at this table, recognition of our sovereign right to explore and expand beyond our solar system, and a guarantee that no further hostile actions will be taken against our species." Zavex's compound eyes shifted in patterns that indicated intense calculation. "And if we refuse?" Then we'll take our place anyway, Dave answered with a shrug. But it'll be a lot messier, trust me, nobody wants that. Consider this, Alvarez added. In 37 years under quarantine, we've developed technology that can bypass your most sophisticated security systems. We've built ships that your sensors can't detect. We've created weapons that can disable your vessels without destroying them. Imagine what we could accomplish as allies, instead of adversaries. The chamber had grown quiet, the representative seemingly stunned by the implications. You have 24 hours to begin formal negotiations, Alvarez concluded. A delegation from Earth will arrive at these coordinates. A series of numbers flashed across the bottom of the hologram. We look forward to a productive dialogue. The hologram flickered and vanished, leaving the great chamber in stunned silence. After several long moments, an elderly representative of the Tellurian collective rose to speak. Unlike most council species, Tellurians were mammalian and shared certain physiological similarities with humans, a fact that had always made them somewhat sympathetic to Earth's situation. High Counselor, the Tellurian said, her voice carrying the weight of 7 centuries of wisdom. I believe we should consider the humans' proposal. Consider it? Zavex responded incredulously. They have threatened us. Have they? The Tellurian's 4 eyes blinked serenely. I heard an offer of peaceful negotiation backed by a demonstration of capability. That is not a threat. It is diplomacy, as practiced by many young species. They violated the quarantine. A quarantine that perhaps we should have revisited long ago, the Tellurian interrupted gently. When we first encountered humans, we judged them by their conflicts, their divisions, their potential for violence. We failed to give equal weight to their capacity for cooperation, innovation, and growth. She gestured to where the hologram had been. They could have attacked us. They could have destroyed our ships rather than simply disabling them. They could have used the information they stole to cause chaos throughout Council space. Instead, they asked for recognition and dialogue. Does that sound like a species that cannot be reasoned with? Murmurs of consideration spread through the chamber. Zavek's antennae twitched in agitation. You suggest we reward their behavior? I suggest we acknowledge reality, the Tellurian responded. The quarantine has failed. Humanity has proven they cannot be contained. We can either forge a new relationship with them, or face the consequences of continued hostility toward a species that clearly should not be underestimated again. As debate erupted throughout the chamber, a junior Vexar aide approached Zavex and whispered urgently in his ear. The High Counselor's compound eyes widened in alarm. Silence, he commanded, his voice cutting through the cacophony. I have just received word that 50 human vessels have appeared in orbit around this world. They are not attacking, not threatening, merely waiting. A new wave of shocked murmurs swept through the chamber. How? Someone called out. How did they bypass our defense grid? The same way they bypassed everything else, the Tellurian representative said calmly. They have clearly been studying us for years while we believed them safely contained. Perhaps it is time we studied them in return, as potential allies rather than as prisoners. Zavex's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed this unexpected development. Centuries of Vexar tradition emphasized logical analysis over emotional reaction, and logically their options were limited. Very well, he said finally. We will meet with the human delegation tomorrow, but they will be watched closely. Any sign of aggression will be met with the full force of the Council's combined fleets. The Tellurian nodded serenely. I believe that is acceptable, though I would caution against any provocative displays of military might. The humans have shown remarkable restraint thus far. It would be unfortunate to escalate unnecessarily. As the session adjourned in a flurry of worried conversations, Security Director Zarlith Kavex stood at the back of the chamber, her posture rigid with tension. Unlike most of the representatives present, she had actually interacted with a human. She had looked into Dave Miller's eyes and seen something that still haunted her. Not malice or hatred, but a calm certainty, a patience that seemed at odds with everything the Council believed about human nature. Why aren't you scared, human? She had asked. Because I'm not the one who should be scared right now. She shivered despite the chamber's comfortable temperature. The human had been right, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Dave Miller straightened his formal dress uniform, tugging at the high collar that always made him feel like he was being slowly strangled by bureaucracy. After weeks in Vexar captivity followed by the mad rush of Operation Breaking Point, putting on the stiff ceremonial garb felt almost as alien as the council chamber they were about to enter. Stop fidgeting, Captain Alvarez murmured beside him. You faced down the Vexar while pretending not to be terrified for 3 weeks. You can handle wearing a proper uniform for a few hours. With all due respect, Captain, I'd rather face an entire Vexar security squad than deal with this collar. Dave gave it one final adjustment. There, how do I look? Like a credit to humanity, which is exactly what we need right now. Alvarez surveyed the rest of the human delegation, 15 representatives in total, carefully selected to showcase the diversity of Earth's population and expertise. Scientists, diplomats, military personnel, and even a poet-philosopher who had won the Nobel Peace Prize for her work on interspecies communication theory. Remember, Alvarez continued, addressing the entire group, this isn't about intimidation, despite our show of force in orbit. It's about establishing that we deserve a place at the table, that we've earned it not just through technological advancement, but through our capacity for reasoned dialogue. Ambassador Takashi Yamamoto, the delegation's lead diplomat, nodded. And if reasoned dialogue fails, we have 50 warships in orbit to emphasize our point. His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Alvarez replied. The goal is integration, not domination. A soft chime indicated that it was time. The massive doors to the council chamber began to open, revealing a space far larger and more impressive than any human-built structure. The chamber was a perfect dome, large enough to comfortably seat representatives from over 400 species, with architectural elements designed to accommodate beings of wildly different physiologies and environmental needs. At the center was a circular platform where petitioners traditionally stood. It was there that the human delegation was expected to make their case. Dave had seen images of the chamber during his intelligence briefings, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of it. The sheer alienness, the dizzying variety of life forms, the weight of thousands of years of galactic history embodied in the very walls. Breathe, Lieutenant, Alvarez whispered. Just like we practiced. Dave nodded, forcing air into lungs that suddenly seemed reluctant to expand. He wasn't typically prone to anxiety, but this, standing before representatives of hundreds of alien civilizations, many of whom viewed humans as dangerous primitives, was enough to make anyone a little lightheaded. With Ambassador Yamamoto in the lead, the human delegation walked forward into the chamber. A hush fell over the assembled representatives as they moved toward the central platform. Dave could feel thousands of eyes, optical sensors, and sensory appendages tracking their progress. High Counselor Zavex waited at the speaker's podium, his iridescent exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber's lights. As the humans took their places on the platform, Dave found himself scanning the audience until he spotted a familiar figure. Security Director Zarlith, standing rigidly among the Vexar delegation. Their eyes met briefly, and Dave couldn't resist giving her a small nod of recognition. To his surprise, she returned the gesture, her mandibles clicking once in what he had come to recognize as reluctant acknowledgement. Representatives of Earth, Zavex began formally, his translated voice echoing through the chamber. You have requested this audience through unprecedented means. The Council has agreed to hear your petition, despite the irregular circumstances of its submission. Ambassador Yamamoto stepped forward. At 67, he was the oldest member of the delegation, his hair completely silver, his face lined with experience. He had been a junior diplomat when the quarantine was first established, and had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. High Counselor, esteemed representatives of the Galactic Council, he began, his voice strong and steady. We come before you not as supplicants, but as equals. Not as primitives seeking admission to a club beyond our understanding, but as a sovereign species claiming our rightful place among the stars. He paused, allowing his translator to catch up for those species whose translators were not configured for human languages. 37 years ago, this council judged humanity unworthy of joining the galactic community. You observed our conflicts, our divisions, our struggles, and decided we were too dangerous to be allowed beyond the boundaries of our own solar system. You erected a quarantine without our consent or input, effectively imprisoning an entire species based on a snap judgment and limited observation. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, but Yamamoto continued undeterred. What you failed to understand then, what we are here to help you understand now, is that conflict and cooperation are not mutually exclusive aspects of our nature. Our capacity for disagreement exists alongside our capacity for working together. Our history of violence is matched by our history of healing, of building, of creating beauty from chaos. He gestured to the diverse human delegation. Look at us. We represent a planet that, yes, has known war and suffering. But we also represent a planet that has overcome division, that has learned to celebrate difference rather than fear it, that has turned competition into collaboration without losing the drive to improve and excel. Zavex's mandibles clicked in what Dave recognized as skepticism. Fine words, Ambassador. Yet your actions, bypassing our quarantine, infiltrating our systems, displaying military force in orbit around a council world, suggest your species remains as aggressive and unpredictable as we initially judged. Captain Alvarez stepped forward. With respect, High Counselor, those actions were necessary responses to your unjust quarantine. You left us no peaceful path to this chamber, no diplomatic channels, no means to appeal your decision. What would your species have done if similarly confined? Before Zavex could respond, the elderly Tellurian representative who had spoken the previous day rose from her seat. If I may, she said, her melodious voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. I am Elder Cathara of the Tellurian Collective. I have studied the records of humanity since the quarantine was first proposed, and I believe there is wisdom in what these humans say. She turned to address the wider assembly. Many of our member species faced similar judgment when first encountered. The Draconids were deemed too aggressive, the Ilari too secretive, my own people too individual to function within a collective framework. Yet all found their place here eventually. Her 4 eyes blinked serenely. The question is not whether humans have flaws. All species do. The question is whether they have the capacity to recognize those flaws and work to overcome them. Their presence here, seeking dialogue rather than conquest, despite their obvious military capability, suggests they do. Zavex's antennae twitched in irritation. The Elder's wisdom is noted. However, we cannot ignore the fact that humans have already demonstrated a willingness to violate Council directives and security protocols. How can we trust such a species to abide by our laws and customs going forward? Dave found himself stepping forward before he'd consciously decided to speak. Captain Alvarez shot him a warning glance, but Ambassador Yamamoto nodded slightly, giving him permission to continue. High Counselor, Dave said, addressing Zavex directly. During my time in Vexor custody, I had many conversations with Security Director Zarlith about trust and predictability. All compound eyes in the Vexar delegation turned toward Zarlith, who stiffened noticeably. She believed, as you do, that humans are unpredictable and therefore untrustworthy. I tried to explain that from our perspective, it's quite the opposite. We are extremely predictable in one crucial way. We always push back against confinement, against being told what we cannot do or become, against arbitrary limitations. Dave gestured to the chamber around them. You created a civilization based on order, categorization, and clear hierarchies. It's impressive, and it's brought peace to hundreds of worlds. But when you encountered a species that didn't fit neatly into your existing categories, you didn't try to understand us. You contained us. He took a breath. If you want humans to be trustworthy partners, the solution isn't to cage us or control us. It's to work with us. Give us a reason to cooperate rather than resist, and you'll find no more reliable allies in the galaxy. A brief silence fell over the chamber as his words were translated and considered. Then another representative rose, a Draconid, their scaled body gleaming like burnished copper in the chamber's light. The human speaks truth, the Draconid said, voice rumbling like distant thunder. My people were once considered too aggressive for council membership. 3 centuries of quarantine did not tame us. It merely delayed our development and fostered resentment. It was only when we were offered partnership that we found our place here. Other representatives began to rise, species that had once faced similar judgments and restrictions before eventually being accepted into the council. Zavex's compound eyes shifted rapidly, taking in the changing mood of the chamber. The Vexar were nothing if not practical, and it was becoming clear which way the political winds were blowing. What exactly do you propose? He asked finally. Ambassador Yamamoto stepped forward again. We propose a phased integration. Lift the quarantine immediately. Establish diplomatic relations between Earth and the Council. Create a pathway to full membership that allows both sides to build trust gradually. And your fleet in orbit? Zavex pressed. We'll return to Earth once an agreement is signed, Captain Alvarez replied firmly. We came prepared for either outcome, High Counselor. We prefer the peaceful one. Zavex conferred briefly with other members of the Vexar delegation, including Zarlith, whose input he seemed to value despite her junior status. Finally, he turned back to the humans. The Council will need time to deliberate on such a significant change in policy. We will recess for one standard day to consider your proposal. Ambassador Yamamoto bowed slightly. We appreciate your consideration, High Counselor. We await your decision. As the human delegation was escorted from the chamber, Dave found himself walking near Security Director Zarlith, who had been assigned as part of their security detail, an irony that wasn't lost on either of them. So, he said quietly, falling into step beside her. We meet again, under slightly different circumstances this time. Her mandibles clicked once. Indeed. Though I still do not fully understand your species, Lieutenant Miller. Call me Dave. I think we're past titles at this point. Very well. Dave. The name sounded strange through her translator. I have been reviewing our interactions during your captivity. You gave me several clues about what was coming, yet I failed to recognize them. Why? Dave shrugged. Honestly, because I liked you. You were doing your job, and you treated me with more respect than most of your colleagues. I wanted to give you a fighting chance. To do what? To adjust your perspective before everything changed. He glanced at her. Did it work? Zarlith was silent for several steps. Then, so quietly that Dave almost missed it, she said, Perhaps. I have requested assignment to the diplomatic team that will liaise with Earth, should the quarantine be lifted. Dave smiled. I think that's a great idea. We could use more Vexar who are willing to see humans as we actually are, not as you fear we might be. It is not fear, she corrected automatically. Then, with what might have been the Vexar equivalent of a sigh, she added, Or perhaps it is. Your kind is unsettling to us. You transform so quickly, adapt so readily, break rules that seem fundamental. That's fair, Dave admitted. But those same traits make us pretty interesting neighbors once you get used to us. Before Zarlith could respond, they reached the chambers assigned to the human delegation. Captain Alvarez caught Dave's eye and beckoned him inside for the post-session debriefing. I believe this is where we part ways for now, he said to Zarlith. See you tomorrow? The Vexar security director's compound eyes shifted in what Dave had come to recognize as thoughtful consideration. Yes, she said finally. I believe you will. The next day, when the council reconvened, the chamber was even more crowded than before. Representatives who had attended virtually the previous day had rushed to Harmonious Unity overnight, unwilling to miss what was widely expected to be a historic session. The human delegation once again took their place on the central platform, their posture confident but not arrogant, their expressions serious but open. High Counselor Zavex called the session to order, his formal armor even more elaborate than the previous day, a sign of the occasion's importance. Representatives of Earth, he began, the Council has deliberated on your proposal with the gravity it deserves. We have reviewed historical precedents, consulted with experts on interspecies relations, and considered the practical realities of our current situation. Dave held his breath. The formal diplomatic language gave no hint of which way the decision had gone. While there remains significant concern about humanity's methods and potential for disruption, we cannot ignore the reality you have demonstrated. The quarantine has failed to contain you and may indeed have been counterproductive to peaceful relations between our civilizations. A murmur of agreement rippled through portions of the chamber. Therefore, by majority vote, the Council has decided to conditionally accept your proposal for phased integration. Ambassador Yamamoto's posture remained carefully neutral, though Dave could see the slight relaxation around his eyes, the only indication of his relief. The quarantine will be lifted immediately, Zavex continued. Diplomatic relations will be established between Earth and the Council. A pathway to potential membership will be created, with specific milestones and evaluations over a period of not less than 10 galactic cycles. Captain Alvarez stepped forward. And during this probationary period, what restrictions will be placed on human movement and development? Zavex's compound eyes shifted to focus on her. Human vessels will be permitted in Council space, provided they register with local authorities and follow established protocols. Technology exchange will be managed through a specially created oversight committee. Cultural and scientific delegations will be welcomed on most Council worlds, with some exceptions for those with particularly fragile biospheres or cultural sensitivities. He paused. However, humanity will not be permitted to establish colonies beyond your solar system during this probationary period, and certain classes of weapons technology will remain restricted. These terms are non-negotiable. Ambassador Yamamoto conferred briefly with Captain Alvarez and the rest of the delegation. Dave could see the military officers bristling slightly at the restrictions, while the scientists and diplomats seemed more accepting. Finally, Yamamoto turned back to Zavex. We accept these conditions, with the understanding that they will be revisited as trust is built between our civilizations. Agreed, Zavex replied. A formal treaty will be prepared for signing by the end of this day's session. As the procedural details were worked out, Dave found himself scanning the chamber, trying to gauge the reactions of the various species. Some seemed enthusiastic about the decision, others resigned, a few openly hostile. The Vexar delegation itself appeared divided, with the younger members, including Zarlith, showing more acceptance than their elders. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything humanity had hoped for, but it was a beginning, a crack in the door that had been slammed shut 37 years ago. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was making the most of small opportunities. The formal signing ceremony took place hours later, after legal experts from both sides had reviewed and refined the treaty language. Ambassador Yamamoto signed for Earth, while Zavex and representatives from 12 other major council species signed for the galactic community. As the ceremony concluded, Zavex approached the human delegation directly, a gesture of respect that wasn't lost on those watching. Ambassador Yamamoto, he said formally. Captain Alvarez, Lieutenant Miller, the path we begin today will not be without challenges. There will be misunderstandings, disagreements, perhaps even conflicts. But the Council has existed for millennia because of our ability to accommodate difference and find common ground, even with species whose perspectives initially seem incompatible with our own. We appreciate the opportunity to demonstrate that humanity belongs among the stars, High Counselor, Yamamoto replied. We will work diligently to build the trust this arrangement requires. Zavex's mandibles clicked once in acknowledgement. There is one additional matter. The Council has decided to create a new liaison office specifically for human integration. Given her unique experience with your species, Security Director Zarlith Kavex has been appointed to lead this office. Zarlith stepped forward, her posture formal, but lacking the rigidity Dave had observed during his captivity. Lieutenant Miller, she said, addressing him directly. Earlier you asked me why you weren't scared during your captivity. I believe I understand now. Oh? Dave raised an eyebrow, curious. Humans appear to process fear differently than most council species. For us, fear is a warning to retreat, to avoid, to contain the danger. For you, it seems to be fuel, a catalyst for action and adaptation. Her compound eyes shifted in a pattern that suggested thoughtfulness. It is not that you do not experience fear. It is that you transform it into something else. Dave smiled. That's actually pretty insightful, Security Director. I hope it will be useful in my new role, she replied. Understanding between our species will require many such insights. Captain Alvarez stepped forward. Speaking of understanding, High Counselor, our fleet will begin withdrawing from orbit immediately, as promised. However, we would like to leave one vessel behind, the Odysseus, to serve as a temporary embassy until more permanent arrangements can be made. Zavex's antennae twitched slightly, the only indication of his surprise. The same vessel that disabled our enforcement ship and accessed our secure databases? The very same, Alvarez confirmed, her expression neutral. Consider it a gesture of transparency. Your security experts are welcome to tour the ship, within reason. We have nothing to hide, not anymore. After a moment's consideration, Zavex nodded. Agreed. It will serve as a reminder to all parties of how we arrived at this juncture, through both conflict and cooperation. As the formal proceedings concluded and the various delegations began to disperse, Dave found himself standing with Captain Alvarez, watching the diverse species of the Council interact in the vast chamber. So, he said quietly, we did it. Humanity's out of the cage. Phase 2 complete, Alvarez agreed, though I suspect the hard part is just beginning. Building trust always is. Dave glanced over to where Zarlith was conferring with other Vexar officials. Worth it, though. Just remember, Lieutenant, we're all ambassadors now. Every human who ventures into Council space will shape their perception of our species. The pressure's on to prove them wrong about us. Dave grinned. Pressure, Captain. Telling humans they need to prove someone wrong is like telling fish they need to swim. It's what we do best. Alvarez laughed, a sound rarely heard during the tense weeks of Operation Breaking Point. Fair point. Well, I hope you're ready for your next assignment. Oh. As the only human who's spent significant time with the Vexar, You're being assigned as liaison to Security Director Zarlith's new office. Ambassador Yamamoto thinks your unique rapport will be valuable during this transition period. Dave watched as Zarlith organized her team with brisk efficiency. Despite everything, he found himself looking forward to working with her again. This time as equals rather than captive and captor. You know, he said, I think I'm actually looking forward to it. She asked me once why I wasn't scared. Maybe now I can show her all the things humans do instead of fear. Just don't show her too much at once, Alvarez cautioned. We've got 10 years to prove ourselves. Let's not rush it. Dave nodded, but his mind was already racing with possibilities. 10 years might seem like a long time to the council species, some of whom lived for centuries. But for humans, 10 years was nothing. A blink, a heartbeat. And they had so much to show the galaxy. Captain, he said suddenly, do you think they're ready for us? Really ready? Alvarez considered the question seriously. No, she said finally. I don't think they are. But then again, the universe is rarely ready for transformative change. It just happens anyway. She glanced around the enormous chamber, taking in the dizzying variety of lifeforms, the countless civilizations represented, the weight of history embedded in every architectural detail. The Galactic Council has existed for thousands of years, she continued. They're used to slow, cautious progress, deliberate evolution, careful integration. And now they've got us, Dave said, understanding her point. Exactly. A species that went from horse-drawn carriages to moon landings in less than 70 years. From discovering DNA to editing it in less than 50. From basic computing to quantum AI in less than a century. She smiled. No, Lieutenant, they're not ready for us. But that's not going to stop us, is it? Dave thought about all that humanity had accomplished while trapped in their solar system. About the ingenuity, the creativity, the sheer stubborn determination that had allowed them to bypass the quarantine, steal the Council's secrets, and force their way to the negotiating table. And that was just the beginning. No, he agreed, feeling a rush of pride in his species. It's definitely not going to stop us. Across the chamber, Zarlith looked up and met his gaze, her compound eyes shifting in that now familiar pattern of cautious assessment. Dave gave her a small nod of acknowledgement, which she returned after a moment's hesitation. Why aren't you scared, human? Because I'm not the one who should be scared right now. The conversation played back in his mind, and Dave realized that his answer had been both true and false. Humans did feel fear, of course they did. They simply refused to be defined by it, refused to let it limit them or dictate their future. And perhaps that, more than anything else, was what it meant to be human in a universe that constantly presented new challenges, new frontiers, new reasons for apprehension. Not fearlessness, but the courage to move forward anyway. Not absence of doubt, but determination in spite of it. Humanity had earned their place among the stars not by being perfect, but by being persistent. Not by being fearless, but by defining themselves by something stronger than fear. As the council session officially concluded and the various delegations prepared to depart, Dave looked out at the vast chamber one last time. 10 years to prove themselves. 10 years to show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. 10 years to transform fear into understanding. He couldn't wait to get started. The end. So let me get this straight, Captain Ellie Nguyen said, pinching the bridge of her nose so hard she was afraid she might actually sever it. The Zorilian ambassador just called us, and I'm quoting directly here. A species of hairless primates whose greatest cultural achievement is finding 47 different ways to ferment potatoes? Lieutenant Commander Davis choked on his coffee across the briefing table. Well, technically vodka is just one way to ferment potatoes, but not helping, Davis. Sorry, Captain. Ellie glared at the holographic display showing the most recent transmission from the Galactic Federation Council. The blue-skinned, six-eyed Zorilian representative was still frozen mid-sentence, mandibles spread in what their species considered a smile, but what humans universally agreed looked like someone about to devour a particularly juicy insect. Admiral Wong cleared his throat from the head of the table. At 72, he was the oldest human in active service with the diplomatic corps, and the only one who remembered Earth before first contact. I believe Ambassador Grilzik also referred to our delegation's ceremonial attire as, and again I'm quoting, the equivalent of wrapping oneself in the shed epidermal tissue of inferior species. They insulted our leather shoes? Lieutenant Reed asked, looking down at her regulation dress boots with newfound concern. And our wool uniforms, Communications Officer Park added helpfully. Don't forget they called those the protective coating of bleeding grass mastication units. Ellie fought the urge to bang her head against the conference table. 6 years of careful diplomacy. 6 years of smiling and nodding and pretending that the Zorillians' habit of communicating partially through pheromones that smelled like a combination of rotten eggs and mint wasn't making the entire human delegation nauseous. 6 years of being the newest, least technologically advanced species admitted to the Galactic Federation and therefore the butt of every cosmic joke. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" Lieutenant Commander Davis asked, setting down his coffee mug with deliberate care. "I have a feeling you're going to regardless, Davis. With all due respect to the Federation protocols and our commitment to peaceful integration, I think it's time we stopped being so goddamn diplomatic." A heavy silence fell over the briefing room of the UES Audacity, currently parked in orbit around Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon and the site of humanity's first deep space colony. The silence stretched for 1 beat, then 2, before Admiral Wong let out a wheezing laugh that quickly transformed into a coughing fit. "I'm sorry," the Admiral said, wiping tears from his eyes. "It's just, do you have any idea how long I've been waiting for someone to say that? 23 years. 23 years of watching these advanced species treat us like we're one step above trained monkeys." Ellie leaned forward, suddenly interested. "Sir, are you suggesting we respond?" The Admiral's eyes gleamed with something Ellie hadn't seen before. "Mischief, perhaps, or liberation." "Captain Nguyen, I believe it's time the Federation discovered what humans are really like when we stop minding our manners." And that, as historians would later note, was the precise moment everything changed. The Audacity wasn't the newest ship in Earth's fleet, nor the largest, nor the most technologically advanced. What it did have, however, was the most inventive crew, and a captain who had, until recently, been constrained by diplomatic protocols that she was now gleefully preparing to bend, if not outright shatter. "How's our little project coming along?" Ellie asked, striding onto the bridge with an energy that made several officers look up in surprise. Chief Engineer Takahashi grinned from her station. "We've repurposed the atmospheric adjustment systems exactly as specified, Captain. The Zorillian delegation will never know what hit them." "And their translation matrices?" Lieutenant Reed's fingers danced across her console. "Subtle modifications complete. Everything will still translate correctly, but with some editorial embellishments." "Perfect." Ellie dropped into her captain's chair and spun it to face the viewport, where the massive Zorillian diplomatic vessel hung against the starfield, its crystalline structure reflecting Jupiter's distant light. "And the, special delivery?" Davis approached, tablet in hand. "Ready for transport, Captain. Chief Morozov from Hydroponics sends his compliments and says it's his finest batch yet. I owe that man a bottle of the real stuff when this is over." Ellie tapped her communication badge. "Admiral Wong, we're ready to proceed with Operation Enough already." The Admiral's voice came through, sounding younger than Ellie had ever heard him. "You have a go, Captain. And Ellie, make it memorable." "Oh, I intend to." She gestured to communications. "Hail the Zorillian vessel." The main screen flickered to life, revealing Ambassador Grilzik surrounded by his aides. The Zorillian's epidermis had shifted to a smug purple, a color humans had learned indicated a sense of superiority. "Captain Nguyen." The ambassador's translator rendered his clicks and whistles. "How unexpected. We assumed your species would be in hibernation, processing our critique of your primitive diplomatic approaches." Ellie smiled. Not her diplomatic smile, the one she'd practiced in academy that carefully hid her canines and minimized what the Zorillians considered aggressive facial expressions, but her real smile, wide-toothy and just a little bit predatory. "Ambassador Grilzik, what a pleasure. We've been busy preparing a special response to your thoughtful communication." The ambassador's antennae twitched. "Response. We were unaware your species possessed the cognitive complexity to formulate responses without consulting your Federation advisors." On the Audacity's bridge, several officers stiffened, but Ellie's smile never faltered. "Oh, we're just full of surprises. In fact, we've prepared a demonstration of one of our cultural traditions. As you've taken such an interest in our methods of fermentation, we thought you might appreciate experiencing one of our most cherished beverages." She nodded to Davis, who activated the transporter. On the screen, a shimmering materialized on the Zorillian bridge, resolving into a tray holding several crystal decanters filled with amber liquid. "What is this?" Grilzik demanded, antennae now rigid with suspicion. "We call it whiskey. Specifically, this is Chief Morozov's special moonshine, aged for all of 3 days and guaranteed to strip the paint off a shuttle at 20 paces. Ellie's voice was honey-sweet. "It's customary among humans to share a drink when beginning a new phase of negotiations." The ambassador's mandibles twitched with uncertainty. The Zorillians prided themselves on their xenoanthropological expertise, and refusing a cultural exchange would be admitting ignorance of human customs. "This liquid contains ethanol," one of the Zorillian aides reported after scanning it. "Of course," Ellie replied. "That's what makes it fun." "You intentionally consume neurotoxins for enjoyment?" another aide asked, compound eyes widening. "Absolutely. It's practically a cornerstone of human diplomacy." Ellie raised her own glass, filled with apple juice that looked remarkably similar. "To new understandings between our species." The Zorillians, trapped by their own cultural superiority complex, and unwilling to appear inexperienced with interspecies customs, reluctantly raised the decanters. "How does one properly consume this whiskey?" Grilzik asked, mandibles twitching nervously. Lieutenant Reed leaned toward her console. "According to our cultural database, the traditional method is to throw it back in one go. This demonstrates..." Ellie bit the inside of her cheek to keep from laughing as the Zorillians, never ones to appear less courageous than a primitive species, simultaneously downed the moonshine. The reaction was instantaneous and glorious. Zorillian physiology, it turned out, processed alcohol about 5 times faster than human biology. Chief Morozov's moonshine, which would have had a human breathing fire, hit their system like a photon torpedo. Ambassador Grilzik's exoskeleton flushed a brilliant pink, his mandibles splayed wide, and his normally precise universal translator began to glitch. "That was..." The translator struggled. "Unexpectedly potent. I feel a strange effervescence in my tertiary circulation system." "That means it's working," Ellie assured him. "Now, I believe we were discussing the terms of humanity's participation in the upcoming Federation Summit." What followed was the most productive 30 minutes of interspecies negotiation in human diplomatic history, as the increasingly intoxicated Zorillians agreed to every single proposal Ellie put forward, including several she made up on the spot just to see if they'd accept. "And of course, Earth will need a permanent seat on the Federation Security Council," she said casually, watching as Grilzik nodded enthusiastically, 2 of his 6 eyes now struggling to focus on the same point. Naturally," the translator hiccuped. "Humans have shown themselves to be most ingenious. Did you know," he leaned conspiratorially toward the screen, nearly tipping over, "that the High Council actually thinks your species is dangerously unpredictable? I told them, I said, humans are harmless. Look how polite they are." "Is that so?" Ellie exchanged glances with her crew. "And what does the High Council say about the Ardaxians?" The ambassador waved 3 limbs dismissively. "Terrifying warriors. Their neurotoxin spines make them untouchable. That's why they get away with so much in council negotiations." "Fascinating," Ellie murmured, filing that information away. "And what about the trade embargoes on Earth technology?" "Purely precautionary." Grilzik was now spinning slowly in his hover chair. "Some species were concerned about how quickly you adapted Vruxian FTL concepts. Made the Vruxians look bad, you know. They've been refining that tech for millennia, and you hairless primates tweaked it in a decade." On the Audacity's bridge, Chief Engineer Takahashi straightened proudly. "Ambassador," Ellie said, deciding to push her luck, "would you say humans have been underestimated by the Federation?" Grilzik laughed, a sound like marbles in a garbage disposal. "Catastrophically. Your species is terrifying. No natural defenses, no evolutionary advantages, and yet here you are, in space, making friends with everyone. It's unnatural." By this point, the ambassador's aides were frantically trying to end the transmission, but their coordination was similarly compromised by Morozov's moonshine. One bumped into the communications array, inadvertently broadcasting their conversation to several other Federation vessels in the vicinity. "One more question, Ambassador," Ellie said, leaning forward. "What would you say is the biggest misconception about humans in the galactic community?" Grilzik seemed to sober for just a moment, his compound eyes focusing with surprising clarity. "That you're harmless because you're nice," he said, mandibles clicking softly. "The smart ones know better. The smart ones know you're nice because otherwise you'd be unstoppable." The transmission cut abruptly as an aide finally managed to terminate the connection. In the silence that followed, Admiral Wong's slow applause came through the comm system. "Impressive, Captain. I believe the humans have a saying about this sort of situation." Ellie grinned. "That was just the opening act, sir." 3 days later, a Federation peacekeeping force arrived at Europa, responding to what the Zorillians were calling an act of chemical warfare. The peacekeepers, a mix of species but primarily led by the Ardaxians, 8-foot-tall reptilian humanoids with precisely the neurotoxin spines Grilzik had mentioned, seemed surprised to find the human delegation calmly going about their business. "We expected hostilities," Commander Kostek of the Ardaxian contingent said, spine ridges twitching with confusion as Ellie personally welcomed them to the Europa Station's conference center. "Hostilities? Not at all. We were just introducing the Zorillians to human cultural practices." Ellie gestured to the conference table where a spread of Earth foods had been arranged. "We hope you'll accept our hospitality as well." The Ardaxian eyed the display warily. "These are not also laced with intoxicants, I presume?" "Commander, I am shocked at the suggestion." Ellie's face was a mask of innocence. "The whiskey was a ceremonial exchange. This is just lunch." The Federation representatives, bound by the same diplomatic protocols that had constrained humans for years, reluctantly took their seats. The Audacity's crew, strategically placed throughout the room, watched with barely concealed amusement. "Now," Ellie began, once everyone was settled, "I understand there's been some confusion about humanity's place in the Federation hierarchy." Commander Keswick hissed softly. "The hierarchy is determined by technological advancement, territorial reach, and species longevity. Humans rank where you deserve to rank." At the bottom, another representative, a gaseous entity contained in a hovering apparatus, added with a bubbling sound that their translator rendered as a chuckle. "I see." Ellie nodded thoughtfully. "And this ranking affects trade agreements, colonization rights, and military assignments, correct?" "Precisely," the Ardaxian confirmed. "The natural order must be maintained." "Interesting." Ellie tapped her datapad, and the room's central holoprojector activated, displaying a star chart of Federation space. "Because I've been reviewing some data, and it seems this natural order has resulted in an unusual pattern of resource distribution." The star chart shifted, highlighting trade routes that conspicuously bypassed Earth and its colonies, while channeling valuable materials toward the homeworlds of the Federation's founding species. "Statistical anomalies," the gaseous entity dismissed. "The flow of resources follows efficiency algorithms." "Of course," Ellie agreed pleasantly. "Just like the efficiency algorithm that assigned human ships to patrol the Wyvern Nebula, coincidentally the most radiation-heavy region in the quadrant, damaging to most species biology but merely inconvenient for humans." The Ardaxian scales flushed a deeper red. "Your species possesses remarkable radiation resistance. It would be wasteful to assign others to such duties." "Wasteful. Right." Ellie's smile never wavered. "Just like it would be wasteful to allow humans access to fold space technology, or quantum entanglement communications, or gravitational manipulation fields." A uncomfortable silence fell across the table. "Those technologies are restricted for species who have demonstrated the proper evolutionary maturity to not compete with the established order?" Lieutenant Reed interjected mildly. Commander Castkay's spines flared, a warning display that made his security detail reach for their weapons. The human security team didn't move, which somehow seemed more threatening. "Careful, Lieutenant," the Ardaxian warned. "Such accusations border on sedition against the Federation Compact." Ellie sighed dramatically. "You know what I find fascinating? In the 6 years since Earth joined the Federation, we've carefully studied every regulation, every protocol, every bylaw in the Compact. Would you like to know what we discovered?" Without waiting for an answer, she continued. "There's no actual hierarchy codified anywhere in Federation law. The stratification of species is an unwritten understanding among the founding members. A gentleman's agreement, if you will." Now the entire delegation was shifting uncomfortably. "Furthermore," Admiral Wong added, speaking for the first time since the meeting began, "the restriction of technology sharing is explicitly forbidden by Article 17 of the Federation Charter, which states that no advancement critical to the well-being and security of member species shall be withheld without unanimous council approval." The gaseous entity expanded slightly, and what humans had learned was an expression of alarm. "You are quoting archaic regulations that have been interpreted through centuries of practical application." "Interpreted," Ellie repeated, "but never amended. The actual law remains unchanged." The Ardaxian commander's tail lashed once, cracking against the floor. "What exactly are you implying, Captain?" Ellie leaned back in her chair, the picture of relaxation. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating for the record that humanity has been systematically marginalized by an informal agreement that contradicts the Federation's own founding principles, and we're not particularly interested in continuing that arrangement." That sounds suspiciously like a threat, hissed the commander. A threat? Ellie looked shocked. No, just an observation that things are about to change. She glanced at her datapad. In fact, they already have. While we've been having this lovely conversation, Earth's full report on Federation legal discrepancies has been transmitted to every member world in the Alliance. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. The Ardaxian delegation rose to their full height, spines fully extended. The gaseous entity pulsed rapidly through various colors. The other representatives began talking over each other as their translators struggled to keep up. Admiral Wong raised his hand, and silence gradually returned. Before anyone does anything hasty, you should be aware that humanity has also taken the liberty of distributing certain technical specifications we've been developing independently. What specifications? The commander demanded. Chief Engineer Takahashi stepped forward, activating her own datapad. A hologram appeared showing schematics for a propulsion system unlike anything the Federation representatives had seen before. We call it the Alcubierre-Martinez drive, she explained. It creates a true space-time bubble rather than merely accessing fold space. By our calculations, it's approximately 3 times faster than the current Federation standard and requires 40% less exotic matter to operate. The delegation stared in stunned silence. That's impossible, one of the representatives finally stammered. Your species hasn't even had spaceflight capability for 2 centuries. 153 years, Lieutenant Reed corrected. But we've been particularly motivated students. Especially, Davis added with a grin, when we're told something is beyond our capabilities. Commander Castiquet's translator seemed to struggle with his next words, eventually rendering them as, "You've been deliberately concealing your technological advancements. This is a direct violation of what?" Ellie interrupted. The same regulations you've been selectively enforcing? We disclosed exactly what the membership requirements demanded. No more, no less. This is why advanced species are careful with primitives, the gaseous entity burbled angrily. You've had access to Federation knowledge for a mere 6 years, and already you threaten the stability of a system that has maintained peace for millennia. Admiral Wong chuckled. We're not threatening anything. We're simply declining to continue playing by rules designed to keep us at a disadvantage. Ellie stood, placing her palms flat on the table and leaning forward. Let me be perfectly clear. Humanity is not withdrawing from the Federation. We're not declaring independence or starting a conflict. We're simply renegotiating our position. The Federation does not renegotiate with individual member species, the Ardaxian stated flatly. They do now, Ellie replied with equal firmness. Because in addition to the Alcubierre-Martinez drive, we've also distributed the specs for our adaptive shield technology, gravitational manipulation algorithms, and a rather innovative approach to quantum entanglement communication. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. You're bluffing, Commander Castiquet growled. No single species could have developed so many advancements independently, especially not one as young as yours. In answer, Ellie simply nodded to Lieutenant Commander Davis, who activated a control on his wrist device. Outside the station viewport, the Audacity suddenly shimmered and vanished from sight. Cloaking technology is theoretically impossible, the gaseous entity exclaimed. The energy requirements alone. We call it the quantum displacement field, Davis explained helpfully. It doesn't actually cloak the ship so much as shift it partially out of phase with normal space-time. A side effect of our experiments with the Alcubierre-Martinez drive, actually. The Ardaxian commander's scales had paled to an ashy gray. The High Council will view this as an act of aggression. That would be unfortunate, Ellie said calmly, especially since we've only shared these technologies with Federation members who, like Earth, have been classified in the lower tiers of your unofficial hierarchy. I believe there are 27 of us in total, all equally interested in a more equitable alliance. The implication hung in the air like a drawn weapon. Admiral Wong cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a brief recess to allow the delegation time to consult with the High Council. I'm sure they'll want to discuss humanity's proposal for reformation of Federation protocols. Proposal? The gaseous entity bubbled. You've already unilaterally redistributed restricted technologies. We've shared our own innovations, Ellie corrected. Nothing we've developed came from reverse engineering Federation tech. We've been careful about that. Legally careful. She smiled. We read the fine print. As the delegation filed out, visibly shaken, Admiral Wong moved to stand beside Ellie. That went well, he murmured. Phase 1, she agreed. How long do you think before they call an emergency session of the full council? Given the panic we just witnessed? Hours, not days. The Admiral's eyes twinkled. You realize, of course, that we've just fundamentally altered humanity's position in the galactic community. That was rather the point, sir. Indeed. I just hope they don't call our bluff on the quantum displacement field. Davis got a little carried away with that one. Ellie's eyes widened slightly. You mean we don't actually have... Oh, the audacity definitely vanished, the Admiral assured her. The question is whether Davis can bring it back. The emergency session of the Federation High Council convened 12 hours later, with representatives from all 118 member species in attendance, either physically or via holographic projection. It was the first time in over a century that every single member had participated simultaneously, a fact that was not lost on the human delegation. The council chamber within the massive Federation hub, a space station roughly the size of Earth's moon that served as the political center of the Alliance, hummed with tension and the myriad atmospheric requirements of dozens of different species. Humanity had been granted 3 representatives, Admiral Wong, Captain Nguyen, and surprisingly, Lieutenant Commander Davis, whose sudden expertise in quantum displacement had earned him a hasty field promotion and a place at the diplomatic table. I still can't believe they bought it, Davis whispered as they were escorted to their designated platform, significantly closer to the center of the chamber than Earth's representatives had ever been positioned before. They didn't buy anything, Ellie murmured back. They're terrified of what else we might have developed while playing the role of the Federation's obedient new pet. Admiral Wong adjusted his formal uniform. Remember, we're not here to gloat. We're here to establish a new equilibrium. Of course, sir, Ellie replied, then added under her breath, but a little gloating might be unavoidable. The chamber quieted as the council arbiter, a Vruxian, one of the founding species known for their silicon-based biology and methodical thought processes, activated the central podium. This emergency session has been called to address certain revelations regarding the technological capabilities of our human member state, and their subsequent actions in sharing these capabilities with other Federation members. The arbiter's crystalline features remained impassive, but the slight vibration in their voice-producing structures betrayed their agitation. Representatives of Earth, you stand accused of deliberately concealing technological advancements, circumventing established channels of innovation sharing, and inciting disorder among member states. How do you respond? Admiral Wong stepped forward, his decades of diplomatic experience evident in his composed demeanor. Council Arbiter, distinguished representatives, humanity acknowledges these actions, but rejects the characterization of wrongdoing. We have operated entirely within the letter of Federation law, while the Federation itself has systematically violated the spirit of its own founding principles. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Explain, the Arbiter demanded. Gladly. The Admiral activated a holographic display showing the same resource distribution patterns Ellie had presented earlier. For 6 years, humanity has observed and documented the disparity between the Federation's stated principles of equality and cooperation, and the reality of its hierarchical structure that privileges the founding species and their closest allies. The Zorilian representative, noticeably subdued compared to their previous interactions, clicked their mandibles in objection. All species advance at their own evolutionary pace. The Federation merely acknowledges these natural differences. And yet, Ellie interjected, stepping forward, when a species advances more rapidly than expected, the response is not celebration, but restriction. Captain Nguyen, the Arbiter acknowledged her with a slight crystalline shiver that humans had learned indicated disapproval. Your point is noted, but does not address the central concern. The unilateral sharing of advanced technologies threatens the stability of the Federation. Does it? Ellie countered. Or does it threaten the artificial stratification that keeps certain species dominant regardless of merit? The chamber erupted in a cacophony of objections, translator matrices struggling to keep up with the overlapping voices, clicks, whistles, and pheromone releases. The Ardaxian commander Kesset rose on his platform. Order! This session will maintain order! Once the noise subsided, he fixed his reptilian gaze on the human delegation. What precisely does Earth hope to achieve with this disruption? Lieutenant Commander Davis, who had been nervously shifting his weight from foot to foot, unexpectedly spoke up. We want what your own charter promises. A true meritocracy of species, where advancement is determined by innovation and contribution, not by longevity or historical accident. A thoughtful silence followed his words. And if this demand is not met? The Arbiter's crystalline structure refracted light in patterns that indicated severe stress. Admiral Wong stepped forward again. It already has been met, Arbiter. The technologies we've shared cannot be unshared. The inequities we've exposed cannot be concealed again. 27 member species now possess capabilities they were previously denied. The question is not what happens if our demand is unmet, but rather how the Federation will adapt to this new reality. The council chamber buzzed with private communications and hurried consultations. Perhaps, a previously silent representative suggested, their bioluminescent appendages pulsing slowly. We should consider the humans' grievances on their merits. If Federation practices have deviated from our founding principles, is that not worthy of examination? The speaker was a Lumidarian, one of the oldest species in the Federation, but, crucially, not one of the founding members. Their support carried significant moral weight. Another representative, a methane-breathing entity encased in a containment suit, added, "The technologies shared by the humans have already improved efficiency in our deep space mining operations by 32%. If such advancements were being suppressed merely to maintain hierarchical positioning, is that not counter to our collective interests?" The tide was turning, Ellie realized with a surge of hope. Not just because of human actions, but because they had exposed a fracture in the Federation that had existed all along. The Arbiter's crystalline structure darkened slightly, a sign of deep contemplation. The Council will recess for 12 standard hours to deliberate on these matters. All representatives will reconvene at that time. As the assembly dispersed, Admiral Wong turned to Ellie and Davis with a measured smile. "Now we wait." "Do you think they'll actually reform?" Davis asked quietly. "They don't have much choice," Ellie replied. "We've changed the game. Either the Federation adapts, or it fractures." The Admiral's expression grew serious. "And that, Lieutenant Commander, is why we needed to be so careful. A fractured Federation benefits no one in a galaxy with dangers we've barely begun to comprehend." Ellie nodded, sobering at the reminder of what was truly at stake. "We didn't do this just for Earth's benefit." "No," Wong agreed. "We did it because sometimes being diplomatic means knowing when to stop being diplomatic." The Federation didn't fracture. It transformed. When the Council reconvened, the Arbiter announced the creation of a new governing structure, one based explicitly on meritocratic principles rather than historical precedent. The unofficial hierarchy was formally abolished, replaced with a system of rotating leadership positions and specialized committees where expertise, not species longevity, determined influence. Most significantly, a technology exchange initiative was established, creating a framework for member species to share innovations without restriction, provided they met basic safety protocols. "It's more than I expected," Ellie admitted as the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, where celebrations had been ongoing since news of the Federation's restructuring was announced. Admiral Wong, looking younger than he had in years, nodded in satisfaction. "Humans have a remarkable talent for catalyzing change, Captain. Sometimes by building bridges, sometimes by shaking foundations. Or by getting alien diplomats drunk," Davis added with a grin. "A time-honored human tradition," the Admiral agreed solemnly. As they boarded their shuttle, a message arrived from an unexpected source. Ambassador Grilzik of the Ceruleans had requested a private audience. "Should we accept?" Ellie asked, surprised. "Absolutely," Wong decided. "Diplomacy continues, even after we've stopped being diplomatic." The Cerulean was waiting in a small conference room adjacent to the docking bay. His exoskeleton had shifted to a muted blue, a color humans had rarely seen, as it indicated humility, an emotion the Ceruleans seldom expressed toward other species. "Captain Nguyen, Admiral Wong, Lieutenant Commander Davis," the ambassador greeted them, mandibles held in a restrained position. "I wish to convey a personal message before your departure." "We're listening," Ellie said, genuinely curious. The Cerulean's compound eyes focused on each of them in turn. "In my 526 cycles, I have observed 17 species join the Federation. Some adapted, some struggled, some merely existed in the spaces allowed to them." He paused, mandibles clicking softly. "None have done what yours has accomplished in a mere 6 years." "We're efficient when motivated," Davis offered. "Indeed." The ambassador's antennae twitched in what humans now recognized as amusement. "What you may not realize is that you have fulfilled a prophecy of sorts." The three humans exchanged glances. "The founders of the Federation," Grilzik continued, "left writings about a species that would one day join our alliance, a species without natural advantages, without extraordinary abilities, yet possessed of such adaptability and determination that they would reshape the very structure of galactic society. That sounds suspiciously convenient, Ellie said skeptically. The ambassador's exoskeleton rippled with colors that translated as laughter. I suspected you would react thus, which is why I brought proof. He extended a data crystal. The original texts, with verification markers. You will find them illuminating. Admiral Wong accepted the crystal with a slight bow. Thank you, Ambassador. Do not thank me, Admiral. My species was among those who sought to suppress yours, fearing the very change you have now brought about. The Xerillian's mandibles spread in a genuine expression of respect. We were wrong to fear what we should have celebrated. As they departed, Davis whispered, Do you think that prophecy thing is real? Ellie shrugged. Does it matter? The point is that the Federation needed shaking up, and we did it the human way. By getting aliens drunk and bluffing about a quantum displacement field that may or may not actually exist, Davis asked innocently. Admiral Wong chuckled. Precisely. Though I'd appreciate it, Lieutenant Commander, if you'd finally clarify whether the Audacity can actually disappear, or if you just had it make a well-timed jump to the dark side of Europa. Davis's expression remained perfectly inscrutable. With all due respect, Admiral, I believe that information might be better left ambiguous, for diplomatic reasons. Ellie laughed, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying for 6 long years. I think that's the most diplomatic thing any of us has said in weeks. As they boarded their shuttle, the vast structure of the Federation hub loomed behind them. Still the same physical edifice, but now housing something new and potentially extraordinary. A true alliance of equals, catalyzed by the moment when humanity finally stopped being diplomatic and started being human. And somewhere in the universe, if the Xerillians' claims were true, the ancient founders of the Federation were either laughing in satisfaction or turning in their equivalent of graves. Ellie rather hoped it was the former. Historians note, the events described in this account, colloquially known as the Moonshine Diplomacy Incident, marked the beginning of what Federation scholars now call the Third Reformation. While some details have been embellished through retelling, the essential facts remain. Sometimes the most effective diplomacy happens when the diplomacy stops. As for the quantum displacement field that Lieutenant Commander Davis allegedly created, the technology remains classified to this day, a fact that continues to unnerve certain Federation species considerably. The end.